It was only a matter of time before I was going to read the most unpopular person's palm, perhaps in history. And Adolf Hitler here, he's got some unusual palms. I found it difficult, actually, to find his palms that, images of his palms that weren't tampered. I'm going to see what I can really extract from the images of his palms. I'm going to see what his finger leanings can tell us about his personality, his character, what he's thinking and feeling, of course, at the times that these images were taken. And of course, we all know that he was very unbalanced and essentially a very bad man. But let's see what his hands tell us, and let's see if we can find out anything a bit more behind this complex and crucial historical character. Will his hands show us any reasons as to why he became the man who he was, and the reasons for why he, the ideologies, the thinking, and feeling. So straight away here, I am actually a little bit surprised by the shapes of the fingertips. We've got a pointed Mercury and a pointed Jupiter. Let's go with red today. It seems fitting, doesn't it? The Apollo and the Saturn fingers appear to be a bit more rounded, a little bit more well adjusted in this area of himself. Slightly more adjusted anyway in terms of reputation and career. But this pointed Mercury and the pointed Jupiter, and I've probably said it a few times now, the pointed Mercury really, it shows someone who is very articulate, very verbally articulate, someone who's able to get their point across. It's also a long finger as well, so this in combination is someone who has a loud voice, a big voice. Their message will be heard, and it will be heard well. And the pointedness of the fingertips here, it shows actually quite a sort of feminine side, a quite sort of a psychic approach to things in a way. And this sort of highly sensitive nature, awareness, receptivity. This is a person who's very able to soak up what's around him in specifically in reading the room and being in control, bossing people around. Pointed fingertips is someone, especially with Jupiter and Mercury, can be a bit of a bossy boots, a bit of a nag. But having this sort of pointed Mercury, it's really someone who's very able to charm. I think persuade is the wrong word. If we saw a little finger that curved in slightly and that was very sort of bulbous at the tip, that's someone with immense persuasive abilities. But this pointedness, like I say, they have an awareness. They have a perceptibility. The gift of the gab, really. They know how what people want to hear. And they know how to manipulate them in order to get what they want, really. And, I'm putting things into context here a little bit, quite negatively, but this doesn't, if you have pointed Mercury and Jupiter fingers, it doesn't mean that you are essentially, bad. I just suppose I'm trying to provide a bit of context here. And actually, on the plus side here, we've got Saturn and Apollo, and they're kind of leaning in towards each other. And this always shows someone who's constantly thinking about their environment, their surroundings, and actually is considerate of others. And it was said that, Adolf rose in popularity because of what he did for his people. My nan was actually from Berlin, and she said, people loved him because he eradicated unemployment and built the autobahns, and he did what he said he was going to do. So this is how he kind of became popular, and this is why people started listening to him. But this consideration of his surroundings, the people around him, his environment, is likely to better his own aims. And the thumb surprised me a little bit. I've got to say, the thumb surprised me here, because I was expecting to see a bit of a ballooned thumb, a bit of what was considered the murderous thumb in medieval palmistry, and that was something that kind of, it's a bit explosive. That's a silly example. But, where the logic and the ideas is concerned, it's sort of bottlenecks, quite literally, and leads up to this quite a potentially explosive tip of willpower, drive, determination. And so this is someone who explodes in nature, has an explosive temperament. But we don't really see that here. What we actually see is someone with level, relatively, level in terms of their ideas and will, and that again suggests, as just how he came to get where he was. You know, he was someone who was quite measured in his approach to his ideas. This is probably someone who listened to those around him. And actually, this thumb kind of tapers off into, you know, a bit of a point, just like Jupiter and Mercury. And this shows actually someone who is excellent in short bursts, but becomes quite exhausted, needs quite a lot of frequent naps, I suppose. They don't have the greatest of constitution. At the same time, they have refined taste. They probably spend quite a bit. Jupiter is on the short side. I mean, this is where the phalanx of Saturn begins, and it doesn't reach halfway of Saturn there. So this is someone who clearly has... I mean, you can see as well that the third phalanx of Jupiter is quite wide, it's quite chunky. This is someone who certainly enjoys the pleasures in life, and this is in line with someone with pointed fingertips anyway, this sort of feminine, sensual person. You know, as villainous and as evil as this person is portrayed, actually there is a very delicate and feminine side to this person, which is likely was, you know, there's a side to this person that was kept away from the public eye, and this is always seen in a person who has a Mercury finger that leans away from the rest of the fingers. These three fingers are always quite close together, and this shows conservativeness. Conservative attitude, but this far-leaning Mercury finger shows a need to get away from the public eye and to have freedom in privacy. It also shows someone who won't be governed in personal relationships. So for me, this Jupiter finger clearly shows an inferiority complex. This is someone who would never be happy with their own achievements, or at least would struggle with this. Now, this might be a better example in terms of the chirognomy aspects, because we can really get an idea as to the shape of the hands here and the finger leanings. And you really can see a very long Mercury finger here. I mean, this is an exceptionally long Mercury finger, and we can see that Luna here appears to sort of balloon outside of the palm here, and you know, and it shows a very well developed Luna. Shows someone who is very eager to put themselves out there, to show their self, show what they're worth to the world. You always see this with people who really wish for adoration. And also we see a very well developed mount of Venus here, and whenever you see that gap bridged between Venus and Luna, we see someone who's able to captivate an audience. And it is difficult to see from this image, but I'm quite certain here, just from the lighting, doesn't seem to be any kind of shading at the center of the, at Neptune here, and I would think that this is someone who has an exceptional Neptune mount as well. And the odd thing is, I mean, when we look at the Saturn finger here, it actually looks like there's a line that kind of claws its way up the Saturn finger itself here. I wonder if this is just, the poor quality. I mean, it's an old image, obviously. It's not exactly the most reliable. So I've saved the best image here for last, and this was an image that I found online, and really this is the only decent image I could find of Adolf Hitler's palms. The palmist Joseph Ronald took this picture, I think it's a print, I'm not entirely certain, of Adolf Hitler's palms in a hotel in Berlin in 1938, before he committed some of his most awful acts. And unfortunately for me, it looks as though this image has been kind of tampered with here, sort of marked as sort of notes here. This doesn't look like a very sort of accurate image, but it's the best I could do. So obviously he's decided that there's a cross at the end of the life, beginning of the fate, and a star at the end of the fate line, and an island at the end of a very straight headline as well. For me, what no one seems to have picked up on, because obviously lots of people have attempted to read Adolf Hitler's palms online, no one seems to have picked up on this right here. So at the end of this video, I'm going to explain what I think this means, this horizontal, transverse line on the second phalanx of Jupiter. There is what also appears to be a sort of secondary heart line here, a bit of a fractured and broken girdle of Venus as well. And very interestingly, and perhaps contradictory, we've got this 3 upward strokes here on Mercury, which is, as we know, or as I know, Good Samaritan lines, or otherwise known as the healing stigmata. But because we see this sort of relationship attachment line, or sometimes known as gypsy lines here, marriage lines if you like, we have 3 lines coming upwards and 2 coming down. So actually these may well represent children from this union. So at first glance I thought, well, do we have Good Samaritan lines here? But no, in actual fact I don't believe we do. So I've just done a quick Google, because I don't actually know that much about Hitler, and I don't really want to know. I want to find out what I can from his palms. But apparently he didn't have any biological children of his own that we know of. Now, I don't think these are Good Samaritan lines either still, because they're not really in the right place. They're a bit close together. However, at the same time, he did consider those around him and ways to improve the environment for the lives of others around him, likely to better his own aims, sure, but there was that need there, that drive to improve the lives of others. So perhaps these are Good Samaritan lines. I'm not completely convinced. I actually think these are what are commonly referred to in palmistry as children lines. Now, these don't necessarily mean that this person had 3 children. What this does mean is that they have the potential to have that many children. So there may well have been abortions, there may well have been stillbirths, there may well have been pets even. Sometimes that does happen. The lines in our palms show us how we think and feel. They don't, they're very crafty, these lines. They don't lie as such, but they are open to interpretation. I mean, really, you'd more likely to see the children lines over here. The jury's out a little bit on this one here. I would say these are skills. Now, Mercury, it's the amount of calculations, memory, skills, which is often why when we see these vertical lines on Mercury, sometimes with a line wandering through them as well, they are known as the Good Samaritan lines or the healing stigmata. For Adolf Hitler, these are a little bit further away. They're a bit closer to Apollo. So although it's very hard to see, I've done a little bit of digging here, and I'm pretty sure he did actually have one son from an earlier relationship. And having done a little bit of digging online as well, there is some speculation that he fathered a child back in 1917. So this is an earlier relationship. This is a relationship, and this is like a kind of secondary heartline. And it's sort of kind of attached to this very sort of broken and messy girdle of Venus. So what can Hitler's double heartline tell us? Well, it's a little bit messy. It's a little bit it's not clear cut, it's not clean. A secondary heartline, it provides extra emotional sensitivity, but more than that, complexity, and that combined with an immensely overdeveloped mount of Jupiter, with this very these very pointed Jupiter and Mercury, we have someone who is a bit of a control freak, and when megalomania as well, with this oversized kind of need to dominate and control and to get things right. And when things don't go right, when they don't go this person's way, they're likely to swing from one extreme to the other. This from being from self-congratulating to just wishing to end things, from one extreme to the other. And this very close Mercury and Apollo, they sit very closely together. At least that's how it appears here. That's a potential sign of bipolar disorder. So I'm getting a very sort of instability, really, is what I'm getting at here, really. And the original heartline itself, anyway, doesn't look all that stable anyway, because when we look at, compare it with the headline, very straight, very strong, very deep, and the lifeline as well, the same. But then when we look at the heartline, look at just how barbed it is. It's not. There's pits and marks, and there's striations coming through to stop it, and there's also a bit of disappointment here. There's a little bit of over-idealism. A healthier heartline should probably start a little bit lower down and rise up between Saturn and Jupiter. That would be a bit healthier. This falls a little bit short, and it's not got the greatest of curve to it. It's a little bit ever so slightly wavy as well. So literally the physical heart in itself isn't all that strong as well. And this secondary heart line, you know, you often see it. It's often, especially this sort of fragmented, it's potential sign of atrial fibrillation. So I think that anxiety probably had physical knock-on effects on this person. So what can their headline tell us? Well, this kind of straight headline is someone who is very fact-driven. They're very process-driven, and they are going to, you know, they need to see proof before they believe something. They are highly rational, they're logical, and they are straightforward thinkers, quite literally. And actually, in Roman palmistry, a headline as straight as this was sought after in Roman in generals. You know, emperors would look for headlines as straight as this. Maybe something a bit, you know, a bit more sort of leveled out, not one quite so, you know, downwards leaning. A headline that leans this far down into lunar is someone who is potentially they're very pessimistic, negative, and perhaps even depressed. When you see a headline that curves as it does this, there's a flexibility there. They're able to see around corners. So this kind of headline is, you know, someone who likes to come across as sort of unflappable, emotionless and cool and calm and collected under pressure, as this kind of level-headedness suggests. And it's someone who is very proof and fact-driven. And you can see here by the darkness, this sort of shows out of the depths of determination and drive, this headline is formed. Now then, what Hitler's fate line says about his destiny is quite remarkable, because look at it, and it's very deep, it's very strong, profound, long, and it comes from Neptune, and it's this place of hypnotizing, almost captivating an audience, holding an audience, and it's directly tied to his instincts. His Mercury line rises from it, and yes, it's kind of, you know, implied that it starts with a cross here. This is not exactly how his palm looked, I don't think. This, as I say, has been interfered with this image. If this is the case, then it would imply that this, first of all, you know, this kind of fate line that cuts the palm in half does imply that this person isn't really in control of their own fate. And it also implies that they are essentially ill-fated. They are unlucky. I mean, that's a very vague way of putting things. I would argue that their own actions have caused this cross to kind of form, if this is actually the case, and the star at the end of the fate line, which is also said to, you know, indicate fairly obviously that there's some sort of ill-fated demise, some kind of accident, some shocking blow to their path's journey, the end of their journey at least. But the most interesting thing for me is where this line comes, this little line right here comes into contact from the sun line here, a very deep and strong and prosperous, stable sun line. And this sun line originates from the age of about 24 for this person. There's some progress made to their, you know, they've strived in achieving success, adoration from the age of about 23 there, and that's what really kickstarts their overall success in the first place in their military and political career. But this line right here is telling for me, and I'm going to explain what I think this line is at the end of this video, and really this was a bit of an eye-opener for me, so stick around for that. If you're liking this video so far, thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing. So now I'm going to get around to the little mystery. So this is the second gem of information. This little mystery, this horizontal transverse line on the second phalanx of Jupiter. And actually the answer to this this line here lies in this little book just up here I got on the fridge here, and it is Fortune Telling by Palmistry by a chap called Rodney Davis. and it was the first book on palmistry I ever read. I began this very same book. I've had it since I was 15, 23 years. And in it, Rodney Davis goes on to explain that there is not a very well known trick in palmistry. So the phalanges of the fingers represent the months of the year. They also represent the signs of the zodiac. As you can see, I've labelled them here. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, etc. And so with that in mind, what this means is from April the 20th to roughly May the 20th, there will be an obstacle in his life. That's what this, for me, represents. Quite often you can see this. Obstacles are represented for people in their palms in the months of the year, and it's only accurate to within the degree of a few years, about 5 years or so. Now, any more than that and things start to get a bit hazy, but it's interesting for me because Hitler actually committed suicide on the 30th of April. So we've got this very strong transverse line here. And just when comparing the rest of the fingers and the markings that we see here, for me, it just feels a bit too much of a coincidence. Now then, this is, for me, a juicy little bit of information. I've measured up the palm in terms of the palm's length, and exactly the halfway point is exactly where the fate line crosses the headline. Because initially I thought, well, this is quite a low intersection here. Normally for most people it's near sort of 2/3 up the palm. So I thought, well, this must be at an earlier age, but actually when we measure it up, it does occur at the exact age of 35. So we can look at this little line here, and here it is, and we can say safely that this is the age of 56. There is a direct correlation and influence. It comes from the fate line, it crosses this secondary heart line, and it kind of attacks the sun line, the Apollo line, the sunshine in their life, so to speak. There is, and if we get a bit closer here, there's almost a thickening of the fate line where this occurs, and it's almost as though the fate, it's almost as though the fate sort of being attacked by the sunline, but actually it's thicker here, so this is where it originates from. And we know now that at the age of 56, Hitler actually took his own life. So that for me is a clear sign of this person's fate being affected by, well, themselves, essentially. This was a decision that was made quite abruptly. The headline ends very abruptly with an obstacle, an island, a moment of extreme stress and pressure. There's a need there to change the surroundings and reevaluate, a need to get out of that situation and that scenario, and there's a line that rises right up and connects to this decision here. And so for me, this is actually, although there might be a star at the end of the fate line, this is a suggestion of things to come for this person. This is where it occurs for this person. So that was fascinating, and it was only because I was able to sort of, measure up using, a little bit of accuracy here, and really determine what point this occurs. So this was fascinating, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, I suppose. It's not like I'd be able to say exactly what was going to happen to this person had I met them in real life. It's just the context here. So that for me was absolutely fascinating. So let me know what your thoughts are on this palm reading, and let me know if you learned anything, and let me know if you have any thoughts on anyone else you'd like me to read, any other famous people you'd like me to read for next Sunday's palm reading. So far I've decided I'm going to read the palms of Princess Diana. I think it's time. I met Princess Diana when I was 4 years old. I told her she was my favourite Ghostbuster, but I'll save it for next week. Let me know what your thoughts are. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.